You're listening to Mark of the Maker. Hey everybody, I'm Mark Steiner and you're listening to Mark of the Maker, and this is episode 53 of the show, and this is another interview episode. Everybody seems to enjoy these, and we got a great guest to join us this time. It'll be a fun conversation with someone that we all know and a lot of you know as well or have met at shows and stuff, so we'll get to that in just a second. Let's make sure we have our whole usual crew here. We have Mr. Sean Kendrick.
Hey, hey.
And we have Mr. Tom Crine.
Hey, guys.
And we have Mr. Michael Birch.
Hello.
Ooh, that's much better than your usual.
Hey.
And we have a special guest this time, knife maker. I think it's safe to say award-winning knife maker and lots of other stuff. Mr. Richard Rogers. Welcome to Mark of the Maker, Richard.
Hey guys, nice to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this should be fun.
So, Richard, we usually go through this thing where we talk to people about kind of where they grew up, born and raised, that kind of thing, and kind of how they got to the spot that they are now physically, and then the whole path growing up. And it seems like one of the interesting things about the interview stuff is there's a bunch of commonality, and then in lots of cases stuff is different. So how about you? Where did you grow up?
I was born in El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
And grew up there for a while. Then when I was in like first grade, we moved to Lubbock for a year or so, Lubbock, Texas. And then my father got a job back in El Paso, so we moved back there. He was a banker, and when I was 7, he was killed in a bank robbery.
Oh, geez.
Oh, wow.
So, that was weird, but
yeah.
Then my mom remarried a few years later, and still living in El Paso. And then my stepfather and my mom bought a ranch in New Mexico because he had grown up on a ranch when he was little.
Oh, okay.
So when I was a freshman in high school, we moved up to Magdalena, New Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, the ranch is kind of near a town, but not real near. It's like 4 miles. So that's close out here. Okay. But when we moved there in 78, it didn't have a phone. It had power, but no phone. So it did. In fact, it was 2 years before we got an actual phone.
Really?
So it was different.
Yeah.
So as like a junior in high school, that's when you got a phone?
Yeah.
Wow.
And going to school each day was a 35-mile drive one way.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah, so it was different.
Richard, was your stepfather of a ranching, farming kind of background? Is that or did he choose to do that from something else?
He grew up on a ranch when he was really young and always wanted to go back to that. And so when he was getting towards retirement, he started looking around for a place, and then eventually they bought this one.
Okay.
So I assume you did a lot of chores, a lot of ranch work as a kid?
Yeah, just, that's all, there. We had like, you could get one TV channel here. And you could kind of get it. But that was about it. But yeah, just lots of outdoor stuff, fixing fence and messing with horses and all the, outdoorsy kind of stuff.
Were knives a part of that as a kid or purely out of necessity, or were they something you're kind of like, oh, look at that?
Yeah, I always had a knife ever since I was, probably 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was more of a turn him loose, let's go, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when we were little kids, like on summer vacation, my mom would just lock us in the backyard, me and my sister.
Yeah.
She'd like get up at like 7 o'clock. Okay, you guys had breakfast. Now quit bothering me. Close the door and go in. And then she'd let us in at lunch. You know,
Right.
If you're thirsty, drink out of the hose, you know?
That's what hoses are for.
That's
Best
right.
water ever.
Yeah, man.
It certainly tasted the best when it was hot out, didn't it?
Uh-huh.
I had a babysitter that would do that for a while.
After a while, I mean, in El Paso, you'd have to run the hose for a while before it would be drinkable.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like 100 degrees outside.
I know you probably pulled that trick of turning it on and aiming at a sibling or whatnot or anyone around when it's got that nice hot water in it.
No. Yeah, no, it's not too much. My sister was bigger than I was, and she was mean. And she'd always beat the crap out of me when we were little. And then once I got old enough to really knock the heck out of her, she's, oh, no, I'm a girl. Can't hit me now.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
How convenient.
You know,
They all play that
life
game.
isn't fair. Yeah.
So when you were younger, right before you guys moved to the ranch, I mean, had you been exposed to that kind of stuff earlier in your life as well, or was that kind of a new thing?
Oh, we had, had horses and would go out and ride and stuff, but as far as the rest of it, no, not even close.
Yeah. That had to be kind of an adjustment, right? I mean, like, I don't know, going to a spot that's farm or ranch and maybe one channel and no telephone, and that's got to be an interesting transition to make as a young guy.
It didn't really bother me I had a stepbrother and a sister, and it was horrible. It ruined their lives
Wow.
because they didn't have TV and phones, and oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pretty introverted, so most of that stuff just doesn't bother me.
Right.
Yeah, you could lock me in my shop for a month without seeing anybody, and it wouldn't bother me.
Yeah, you picked the right profession at this point in your life then, right? The hermit life of the knife maker.
So where did it go from there? You graduated high school and you spent time on
graduate.
the ranch.
I was on the ranch most of the time. Then I quit high school after my junior year and just went straight to the college in Socorro. That's the town near us. And
Okay.
it's a real competitive college, New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology. And it's a really technical school for a few professions, mainly engineering, petroleum engineering and mining engineering.
Yeah.
So I went there for a year and then decided to go to Las Cruces, New Mexico State, and I got a degree in accounting.
So it wasn't that you kind of just quit school. You went ahead and got your GED and just kind of said, I'm skipping the rest of this.
No, I just skipped and went to college. I think they eventually transferred credits to graduate, but I have no idea really.
How did you pull that off? I don't know if I would have had the forethought to be like, I'm just not going to do this and skip to the next thing.
Well,
were you just done with school? Or?
I just hated it. I hated every day of school. It was just boring. And then when I took the ACT test, I think that's what it was back then.
Mm-hmm.
My scores were like in the 99th percentile and all of it. So they went and my mom took him to the college there and they said, bring him on down.
Right.
Okay.
So
those
I
mining
gotcha.
schools are a real deal. I think sometimes people think of them as this obscure, kind of funky thing, but there's a number of mining schools around the country and they're serious places to go to school. They're no joke.
No, this is a very high-end, very competitive school.
Yeah.
but it didn't really I really wasn't interested too much in the engineering and stuff. Now, after 9/11, they got all kinds of federal contracts to study explosives, and they train people in like the FBI and marshals and stuff like that to look for bombs and what suitcase bombs look like and how to defuse them and all that kind of thing.
Wow.
But it's a real technical college, but very limited in what they do.
Pretty narrow scope.
Yeah. Petroleum engineering, mining engineering.
So how did you land on accounting? How did you go from working on a ranch to wanting to do accounting?
And it was just something where a very stable profession where you could always get a job.
Mm.
It wasn't like, oh my God, I love accounting.
I don't know. Someone probably out there has said that before, but it seems
Right.
an odd one.
Yeah. But so I went to New Mexico State and in like 3 years got an accounting degree, something like that.
Were the numbers piece of it, Richard, something that kind of just was comfortable for you or came natural, that side of it, like the math thing was a
Yeah, it's all, accounting's pretty straightforward. Basically, accounting is organizing information
Yeah.
so you can use it to make decisions or, just keep track of how things are going.
Right.
And I was pretty organized. My mind kind of worked like that.
Yeah.
So then after I had graduated, I graduated in like December, early graduation. And then a few months later, I was looking around for what to do next, what a job or something to get. And then my stepfather died.
Oh, wow.
And so it was like my mom calls and says, oh, can you come help with the ranch for a few months until everything settles down? And that was 34 years ago, and here I am. I came back and everybody else left.
Oh, wow.
So it's the same ranch?
Yeah.
Oh,
We've been
wow.
here since
That's,
78.
That was when I was born.
Come on, Michael. Why you got to make a guy feel like that?
That's not nice.
Every day I feel old. I had to lash out.
No, it's like, I don't feel old or anything, but then you look around and in the knife business, I'm like one of the old guys, and it's like, damn, how did that happen?
Sometimes I feel old.
Yeah. I think what gets me sometimes is when you're reading a book and the protagonist is much younger than you, and you're like, wait a minute. That's always supposed to be someone you look up to that's responsible and doing all the right moves and things. I'm like, wait, you're supposed to be much older
Wait until
than
the
that.
protagonist is described as an older man with gray hair or something. Then you find out he's 2 years younger than you are. And like, damn,
Yeah.
that's not even nice.
Too funny. Richard and I talked about this the other day, and it was like, man, I don't feel like I'm this old. Right? Yeah, I'm not this old in my head, right? It doesn't seem like
Right.
I'm this old, but somehow you are. It's a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
It happens real
Age
fast.
shows up age shows up when all those little nicks and tweaks in your body that when you were in your 20s disappeared overnight, and in your 30s disappeared after a week. In your 50s, it's like, no, we're just going to stay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sure.
Making funny noises when you get out of bed in the morning, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, man, I sound like Rice Krispies when I get up.
I went
Snap, crackle, and pop.
I went hunting with my kids last weekend, and they gave me a lot of crap for having to get up in the middle of the night. I was like, just wait. It's
Pete?
coming.
Just wait.
Yeah.
Oh,
I had to get up and pee
We're
in
not
the
getting up
middle
because we got the pee. We're patrolling the house. We're protecting our domicile.
Exactly.
We're just peeing because we're up already.
Yeah.
Well, I need
see-
to pee too.
Your kids are young enough; they might actually buy that. Just give it a couple years, Michael.
Yeah.
So when did the knives come into play here? When did you first discover like custom knives, or did you get back into sort of production at some point working on the ranch, or what were you working with back then?
Well, I always had knives. Always at that time, it was mainly like a Case Stockman, like a 3-blade something, or a buck knife, or a straight bladed knife or something. I was trying out, but never thought of making them. And then when I was here, I got a job in an accounting office, and I worked at that for 10 years. And so I was running the ranch and working as an accountant, as a CPA. So, it was always staying busy, but I was always making things, without realizing I was a maker. That, is just like a hobby. I'd, braid leather or rawhide or something like that. But
Just something to keep your hands busy, your brain busy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, or just I was always making stuff. You had to make stuff for whatever reason. I don't know. I'm not real introspective.
For lots of people, it satisfies something, right? It going through that process, even if it's not something fancy or complicated or whatever, sometimes that creating things, it's just healthy for your brain, right? It occupies computing cycles, and it's rewarding when you're done.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's a mess.
Well, I think you're very analytical probably, and the way you were working with numbers, you probably needed something tangible, something that you could create and see in front of you. And you're probably just subconsciously working your way through it.
But so, but always had knives
Richard's
around,
Richard's like, I don't buy any of that shit.
Nah.
No, it's like I just always had a knife. I mean, all through school, I was in probably 3rd grade and had a pocket knife. Nobody cared.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part where I'm old, Nobody cared if you cared. I probably had a rifle in the car every day of high school because you never know if you're going to see a coyote on the way into town.
Right.
And nobody cared. So
yeah. It wasn't unusual.
No, people would have rifles in gun racks and pickups and stuff. So I was working in town as an accountant, and I did that for 10 years, and I just hated it because it was mainly taxes and stuff and small town accounting. So you spent all your time dealing with state government agencies and the IRS and dealing with people's problems. And nobody liked you. The people didn't want to file taxes. They hated it. They hated the government. They hated the whole process, So it was really not fun, Get in on a Monday and have like 20 cold calls. You have to call people and say, okay, back in September, you wrote a check for $52,000. Do you know what that was for? And they couldn't figure it out. They couldn't remember. And I'm like, it was 52,000. You should remember.
Yeah.
So after like 10 years, I just quit. I started just doing the ranch for a while. But the ranch is not huge, so you needed something else to make a little money to live on. So I looked around, and I'd always, during the accounting time, I did some gunsmithing too. I always liked guns, shooting, that kind of thing. So I did some gunsmithing, new sights and whatever. I had a cheap mill and a cheap lathe, so I could do quite a bit of work. But I knew a guy that was doing the same type of thing, and he got sued, and it about wiped him out because, he worked on a guy's gun, and then the guy loaned it to his brother-in-law, I think, and then the brother-in-law did something and accidentally shot someone. So the it didn't kill him or anything, but it wasn't a good situation. So my friend got sued. The brother-in-law got sued. The gun maker got sued.
Yeah.
Everybody got sued. and he didn't have to pay anything, but he had like $25,000 in legal fees.
Wow.
So I kind of wanted to avoid that. So I looked around and ended up trying to make a knife. One of the reasons I had a factory knife, a nicer one that was supposed to be great, and it would lose its edge if you looked at it wrong. I swear you could cut butter and dull this thing. It was one of the worst knives I've ever used, and it was expensive for that time for me. So
This was
I got some
Richard, or a
O1.
straight knife?
Yeah, it was a folder.
Okay.
I don't really want to name.
fair.
I'll tell
Was
you
it Tom
afterward, but I don't want to
No,
say
it's
who
all right.
it is
It's
because
all right.
just piss somebody off.
Pissing somebody off is kind of a specialty of this show, Richard, just so you know.
Yeah, but not the bigger or semi big factories.
Yeah, you don't need enemies.
No, but so I did it, and I bought a couple of books, the Loveless book, and can't remember. There was also How to Make Knives or something, and I made a few knives, and they were rough. I got some O1, heated them with a torch, but they really worked good. I mean, much better than the ones you could buy.
So this
that
was like
time.
stock removal. This is what you were doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all stock removal. I didn't no forging.
Okay.
So this was probably the mid 90s, right?
Early 90s probably. Yeah.
Early 90s.
Or yeah, it's mid 90s pretty much. I kind of started I'd made a few in probably like 95, but really started trying to become a knife maker in 96. And that was one of the things I was going to talk about. Back then, it was so different than it is now. You could buy a book and learn how. Or if you had somebody close to you, you could go bug them and they'd teach you how to make knives. There was no YouTube, no videos, no nothing. So learning was just books and doing it.
Yeah,
And
like tribal knowledge kind of thing, right? You had to know somebody, or like
Yeah.
you said, find a reference that it was decent, that didn't send you down a weird path, it have any hope of success.
yeah, because there was nothing. Now it's like, oh, you want to know how to do something? Get on YouTube, look it up, do a video. Back then it was just like, nope, no internet, no. Hell, we just had like a small computer, but that was for personal stuff like accounting.
You just gotten a TV. I mean, the computer thing is
Yeah.
at least 10
No, we had a
on the road.
TV. We had a TV and actual phone, but it was different. It's satellite TV. You couldn't get anything local.
Make no mistake, Richard, that was the old guy shot. Don't let him hide it on you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But
I mean, did
Yeah,
y'all
so
have
I
light
just-
bulbs back then? That's the kind of move he was making on you.
I know, but I was just my typical beat my head against a wall until I got better, and
Yeah.
I still wasn't very good. The first show I went to was a Arizona knife collector show in, I think it was Mesa. And I went there, a few knives, and but they weren't good, they were okay, but I wasn't satisfied. They weren't nearly what they should be. But you'd go ask people, what they think, or try to look at other people's stuff of what they were doing. So, yeah, I just beat my head against a wall for a while. Then I went to, they decided to have a special Arizona Knife Collectors Association show in the spring, because normally it was in the fall. And so I went to that show, worked real hard, made a bunch of knives, and then get there, and there were like 100 knife makers, and maybe 10 people came to the show all weekend. It was dead. I mean,
Yikes.
just everybody, they opened the door and there was nothing. It's like, okay, this show's done.
Right.
But it was a real important show for me because I was just sitting there, and I'd ask people, what they thought of the knives or how could I get them better, and they just, you're looking good. Just keep doing what you're doing, and I'm like, that doesn't help me.
Right. Not constructive at all, right?
No. And then Tim Hancock and Dee Holder were walking down the aisle and looking, and they picked them up, and I'm like, they're looking at it like, what do you think of them? What can I do to get better? And Tim was looking at it, and he looked at me and said, do you really want to know? And I said, yes. I mean, I was desperate for help and no place to go to get it, really. And so he said, do this and whatever. And then I'll, if you have questions, you can call me. But so I went home and did a few of the things, worked on a few of the things he'd said, like evening up the plunge cuts. But at that time, I had one of the Wilton square wheel grinders, which went about 1 million miles an hour.
Yeah.
And so doing any kind of work like that was almost impossible. So I went home, tried real hard, and then called him and said, can you look at the knives? And so I drove 6 hours over to Scottsdale.
Wow.
And I think we showed up at like 8 a.m. And I went in, or he was there, and it's like, okay, what? And he's like, oh, you need to fix this and this. And then he spent, I guess I was there till like 2:30 in the afternoon. And he showed me, okay, this is how I grind. This is how I do this. This is how I finish a handle. And this is how, he just showed me, and not actually doing it, but holding it up to the grinder and grinding just a little bit, or working on a slack belt. And that's really all I needed, just to see how somebody else did it.
Yeah.
So I went home and just started working on it.
Check that out. Was that very first show that you went to, had you gone to other knife shows at that point just to kind of see what it was all about? Or did you sort of show up to your first show completely
I'd never been to a knife show. I mean, my knife experience was Blade Magazine and Knives Illustrated.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Wow.
And it was just a little club show, but it was, back at that time, there weren't a huge number of shows, and they were really hard to get into if you didn't already have a name. I mean, you couldn't say, oh, call the Blade Show up and get in. It's like, eventually you call the Blade Show and get on a waiting list, and it's like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't, there weren't a lot of shows to get into.
But man, the local club shows were cool. I remember going to those back in the day and having a damn good time.
Yeah, eventually we ended up at some of the California shows, and those were good. The Pasadena show, that was always a really good show. It was a club show, but it was pretty big, and they'd have some really well-known knife makers there. Bob Lum was there. Loveless was there one year. I sat next to Herman Schneider one year at that show and just, sat there and shot the bull with him for a while. He's a very nice guy.
Very cool.
And there were some big makers at the Arizona show. Hancock, Dee Holder was there, Charlie Weiss. Some of these guys aren't big names now, but they were some heavy hitters back when.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Major talent.
That's the one thing about the knife business. I mean, the turnover is there, especially in a lot of the collectors. And if you've been out of it for 4 or 5 years, nobody has heard your name.
Right. Right.
It's just weird. Especially you look at some of the guys in the Art Knife Invitational. Your average knife collector has no idea who they are. They've never heard of them.
Right.
Just no clue. No, it's strange.
Yeah.
But back then, there was no internet. You saw collectors at shows once or twice a year. I mean, the more shows you'd go to, you'd see them. But you wouldn't, I mean, unless you took out an ad in Blade magazine, you just wouldn't see people, or you wouldn't have any exposure. And it was real frustrating getting started, because at that time, the collectors would come by and look at your stuff, and they'd say, "Oh, this is really nice." And then they'd set it down, and then they'd come look at it the next year. And this wasn't like one or two collectors. It was like most of them, because they had seen a lot of people come into the knife business, and then they'd buy them and invest in them, and then they'd drop out, and they wouldn't have any value after that.
Right.
So they wanted to make sure you were going to hang in there and be around for a while. But getting started, nobody's buying stuff for the first 3 years. I mean, we always sold knives, but sometimes it was one knife and it was the cheapest thing on the table.
Yeah.
So after a while, then the collectors would finally start buying stuff. But it was a struggle.
It's like you said, it's way different than now, right? Where
way different.
We see it where today new makers come on the scene sometimes before they've even really gotten started, right? Or they come at it from some other angle, like pocket tools or something else, right? And then kind of start with the knife thing, and they have this constant and direct interaction with customers, right? Or just social interaction on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, or even the YouTube thing, right? If they're charismatic or whatever, that can take off on its own. And the absence of that is kind of a weird thing, I think, probably for a lot of newer collectors to think about, even newer makers.
Well, and I think like a lot of the new stuff gets bought up pretty quickly now, because there has been such a void of things that you're able to purchase. So now it's like everything gets bought up.
Right.
Kind of the complete opposite.
Yeah, it's strange, because then you'll see some guy, it's like, "Hey, this is my first knife. It's a folder and it's got a little lock stick, but hey, $1,100. And then somebody buys it, and I'm like, hello? That didn't used to happen, No.
Well,
you'd be making knives for 3 years, unless you hit a niche or something, but you'd be making them for years before people would just start buying.
Yeah.
They're doing that prospect, and they're hoping that, they buy that first one and hope that maker starts getting a secondary, and then they can sell it, or they're just desperate to have something that's available.
Right.
Yeah.
Lots of that. So at that time, Richard, what were you taking to the shows? Were you taking slip joint stuff or straight knives, fixed blades, or what kind of stuff were you taking or building at the time?
Well, at the first, it was just fixed blades, because that's what everybody had. I mean, there weren't too many people making folders. I mean, there were some, of course, but it wasn't really, really common.
Yeah.
Everybody made like a 4-inch hunter. That was the bread and butter knife. But the problem was everybody made a 4-inch hunter.
Right.
Then, so I was sitting there struggling, looking for, finding a niche or finding something I could do to get noticed, and Gene Shadley and Terry Davis came out with how to make slip joint folding knives. I think that's the name of it.
Okay.
So I got that, and I made a couple, and they were pretty ugly, but I got them made. But they were rough, I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. And so then mine weren't that good, so I quit, because I figured, well, hell, all these guys are going to be making them, and they're going to be top line. And then a year goes by, and nobody was making them, really. And everybody found out that slip joints, while they look simple, are really pretty exacting kind of knives.
Yeah, lots of tricks, lots of little details
that
matter.
No, there's no forgiveness in a slip joint. You in a liner lock or something, the blade's open and closed, and if you don't need a backspacer the whole length of it. On a slip joint, that spring has to be level, open, closed, and at the half stop. And if it's off like a half a thousandths, you can tell easily.
Yeah.
And then once you get everything finished and fitted and polished and stuff, then you beat it together with a hammer.
Right.
And, lots of stuff's been, and there's all kinds of little things that can go wrong there. So they're very exact, and any kind of flaws stick out like a sore thumb. It's just, they're difficult knives to make right. So I started making some of those and got where I could make a single blade. And then, well, if you can make a single blade, then all you need is some super glue, and you glue 2 sets of parts together, and then you make a trap or a 2 blade on the same end. And then you start looking around and, well, try a Stockman, which is a whole different deal, because then once you have to make stuff so the blades pass, grinding them becomes very difficult because they're not straight grinds.
Yeah.
Right? The blade tapers, but the edge, the angle that the blade's ground at changes too. It's much more straight up and down at the front and much more angled at the back. Think about a compound grind that's all blended together.
Right.
And then you have to get good nail nicks, which is one of the main things people mess up. They do some gouged out thing with a Dremel and it looks horrible.
Mm.
But, just learning all that stuff took, because I was by myself pretty much, and it just took time.
So your slip joint stuff, you didn't go study with somebody or work with somebody, at least early on, to figure that stuff out. You were school of hard knocks and doing it out of a book.
Yeah, pretty much. I think I had one question, then I had to call Eugene Shadley, and I called and asked him a question. Conversation was probably like 3 minutes or something. Right. Like I say, I spent 10 years cold calling people about problems, so I hate calling people on the phone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, I hate it. So that's why I have a Sally. Sally calls people on the phone. She can deal with all that stuff.
She's good at that.
Yeah. But then even with when I was getting good at slip joints, at that time, there were like a handful of makers, Tony and Reese Bowes, of course, they were the big guys. And, I don't know, Gene Shadley, Terry Davis, Bill Ruppel was around. But his knives were kind of rough for a while because that's what he made a lot of, They weren't highly finished at that time. So you'd make knives, and Tony Bowes was the big dog, right?
Yep.
He was the guy. Except his theory was you leave meat on the bone for the collectors and stuff. So he held prices way down. I mean, a single blade slip joint was like $250.
Wow.
So if you tried to sell one for $250, they'd go look, hey, I can buy a Tony Bowes for $250. There's no way I'm going to buy yours for that. And it was such a small niche market that the big guy, people would, as a price reference, they'd look at him, and he held them low for years.
Yeah.
Which, no big deal, he can do that. So I was still making slip joints, but I looked around like, well, if he's setting a price on a 3-blade Stockman, I'll make something different. So I ended up making a horseman's knife.
Okay.
Which was a English thing, and it has a hoof pick and stuff on it. Hoof pick and corkscrew and leather awl. And so when you go to make that kind of thing, there's nobody you can ask how to make a corkscrew. Or a hoof pick that folds into a knife. I mean, seriously, right. There's nobody you can go ask.
Yeah.
And it has like a fleam under one scale. And the fleam, you need basically a dagger ground blade that is on a like 30 thousandths thick piece of steel at right angles to the main shaft of the blade.
Yeah.
So all this stuff was just really difficult, and it took me a while. I almost threw the knife through the wall a couple of times because it was so frustrating. Like the hoof pick, it's got to fold over, and then when you push it, it has to be tight enough to snap over, but it can't be too tight because then it's hard to pull off.
Yeah.
So I made that.
Richard, for us non-horse people, what's a fleam?
A fleam is a little thing they used to use to like lance an abscess. If you look at a horseman's knife, it's just a little triangular shaped blade like the point of a dagger, but it's very short. It's only like a ½ inch long. And what they do is they hit that into an abscess or something because it wouldn't go too deep.
Got it.
So that it would drain it.
Yep. Makes sense.
So then just learning how to do all that kind of stuff, that was hard. But I finally got that made and took it to Blade Show, and I won Best in Show in Blade with that knife.
Yeah, very cool.
That came out nice. So I was glad I didn't throw it through the wall.
What year was that, you think?
I really don't remember. I'm horrible with years. I mean, to me, once it's past 6 months in the past, it's all the same.
So it was more than 6 months ago. I got it.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
So I saw a thing that said best folder for 2005 Blade Show.
Oh, that's probably when it was.
Probably, yeah.
I got Best in Show in Blade for 2 years in a row.
Oh,
for
nice.
different stuff. One was that, and then I don't even remember what the other one was. But along after I was starting to look around for different stuff to make, that the Joseph Rogers, the Sheffield folding blades or Sheffield exhibition knives.
Yeah.
That book. And so I just go through the book and look at it and decide, I'll make that and pick one. And then you take a photocopy and then you try to figure out how in the heck to make it. And I made quite a bit of very interesting stuff back then. It was, like a challenge. On my website, there's a thing called Gallery, and it has some photos of the old stuff I used to make.
You made some super complex slip joint stuff, right? Like
very complicated.
Many blades.
Yeah, like 14 blades or implements. and again, at the time, like Grace Horn was talking, it's like, okay, make scissors. Great. Now make scissors. Now make them fit 100 thousandths wide completely with clearance on the side of about 10 or 15 thousandths. And then you need to put a screw in and thread it. And then it's like, holy moly.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's nobody you could go to ask how to do that kind of stuff. You just had to figure it out.
Right.
So learning how to do that was complicated.
Oh, yeah. So that first one, the Horseman's Knife, was that all from a picture or from a production?
I found an old one to look at.
Okay.
I didn't take it apart or anything. I just found it to look at. And so I could see it was a pretty simple one.
Yeah.
It was only 2 layers. So relatively simple. Yeah. But, learning to make tweezers. How do you make tweezers?
Right.
Oh, and they've got to fit under a scale and it's got to be thin.
Yeah.
And, how do you make a saw? Make a saw. Figure out how to make a saw. Saws have to taper their reverse of a knife. They taper from the edge backward because you need clearance as you're cutting through something.
Right.
Yeah, but nobody tells you this. You just got to figure it all out.
So at that point, was it purely the challenge, Richard, or was it like a puzzle solving kind of interest in doing that? Or, I mean, there's got to be some kind of motivation that makes you go beat your head against the wall on some weird stuff.
Yeah, probably just puzzle solving and how to do it. And,
yeah.
And nobody else was doing it. Right. Yeah. Nobody else was doing anything like that. I mean, you guys, even now, guys, oh yeah, I make slip joints, and they make like one single blade slip joint, which is
right.
Okay, now make 14 blades and scissors and corkscrews and tweezers and stuff. Like I say, all that stuff I had to figure out how to make. It was hard or frustrating at times. I don't know how many corkscrews I tried to make before I finally came up with a method that worked.
Yeah. How did you do that? Was it all filed out, or how did you turned it on a lathe, or how did that even go?
I couldn't even get thick enough round bar or anything. So I tried twisting them, just taking a thin piece of steel, grinded it into a wire, and then twisting it around a mandrel to heat it. But I tried like a dozen like that, but it's almost impossible because you have to heat it a lot to do that. And then to get a regular curl and stuff it didn't work. So I ended up filing them. So I had a thick piece of like 1/4 inch ATS. So I cut a chunk off of that with a saw and then chuck it in a 4-jaw chuck and kind of knock the corners off of it because it wasn't big enough to just turn down to a nice round shape.
Yeah.
So you could just almost turn it round, but not quite. And then just I take a threading bit and make one pass with the V bit so I could get a gauge of how the thread should be, to get the spiral right. And after that, it was just filing it out with chainsaw files.
Wow.
Dang.
I know a gentleman that did one and then realized he did it backwards.
Oh.
Ouch.
Mm-hmm.
But, so I did that, and if you find stuff that you try to take it down evenly all the way, all at once, and that didn't work because by the time you got towards the end, it would get so thin that if you were working on the tip of it, the whole thing would just bend, so you couldn't file it. So you ended up doing like a turn and a half, filed almost all the way down, and then another turn, and then another. You do it one little portion at a time.
Yeah. I think Philip Booth did a corkscrew a little while back, and I remember seeing pictures. I think he filed that whole thing too. Same kind of thing, like it's maybe sort of a see if I can do it kind of a project. He built, I think he called it the bartender knife or something, and I'm pretty sure he had to file a corkscrew on it.
That's a complicated one.
I wonder how they manufacture those. Always wondered about that.
I got an idea.
What you got?
Man, I figure if you've ever watched how it's made, you could easily extrude one of those with one of the spring machines, and the way the tip is clipped, you could probably have your tip on it when it gets clipped from the screw machine or the spring machine.
Makes sense.
I mean, dude, it just pigtails stuff out, and then there's a clipper that comes down and pink.
Yeah, except you have to leave a tang on it because once you get your corkscrew filed, then you have to flatten it out for a tang, put a kick so it rides right, put a hole through it. I mean, the corkscrew part is just one smaller part of actually getting the thing to work in a knife.
Oh, right. Absolutely. I was just saying from a straight corkscrew standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure Victorinox has a machine that just goes bzz, 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 and just knocks those out, probably like 10,000 an hour or something.
All right, so you're off making crazy stuff. I remember seeing pictures of probably the 14 blade knife, some crazy looking, very complex thing that you had made.
Yeah.
So and that became kind of a thing. That was a niche thing that you were making this kind of specialty, funky stuff, and then that got people's attention, or
yeah, it got people's attention, but then everybody was like, wow, that's cool, but I don't want to pay for it.
Right.
It's like, I got a month in making this thing and you're offering me like $1,200. And it's like, that's kind of rough. I'm like the only one in the world making this stuff now, except for Gray Taylor was making some too. But, very few. I don't think he was this complicated at first. It was only in a few later years he started doing that.
Yeah.
But Gray did some beautiful stuff. But yeah, nobody else was making this really complicated as far as I know. There might have been some people in Japan. They were always big slip joint collectors and makers. But so, yeah, I couldn't get money from it. It's like, I still have to make a living, kind of.
Yeah.
Right. So cool thing. Did it kind of prove to yourself and maybe other people that you could do it, but not like a viable thing from a from a revenue perspective?
No, it's like Fabergé egg kind of things. You do it and it's a showpiece, but
right.
Unless you're in like the Art Knife Invitational or something where you have that big collector base, it's really hard to earn good money doing it. At least for me, it was.
Yeah.
So I was going along and doing this kind of stuff, and then you started hitting some really bad ranch years, like when NAFTA came through. I don't know if you remember NAFTA.
Yep.
But they had tons of thousands and thousands of cattle coming from Mexico, and that just killed the price of beef. Cattle were selling at that time at the same price they were selling in 1950.
Oh, wow.
And nothing else was priced the same as it was in 1950.
Yeah.
So I really decided I had to get serious about this. You know, trying to actually commercially make more money. So I started looking at liner locks and other things that made more sense commercially.
Yep.
And then I had talked to Luke Burnley, and I was trying to learn a CAD program, of course, on my own, because at the time, my computer bandwidth was such that I could not download a video, just impossible.
Yeah.
So I worked on Rhino by myself and trying to figure it out. And then Luke and Tom and Pat Pruitt, they all were getting together to take a special course in Rhino in Albuquerque. And Luke asked if I wanted to attend it. And I'm like, sure. That sounds good. I need all the help I can get.
Yeah.
So we went there and took it, and I met Pat Pruitt. I'd met him once before, but not really to be friends or anything. And then he was looking at me through the whole thing. He wasn't he was like really like, nah, this guy's a jerk. I don't really like him. Because I probably didn't get my sense of humor. But anyway, then I was talking to him, and eventually he said, look, I'll help you cut some parts. I'll work with you. And I'm sure it was horrible for him. I owe him a huge debt for working with me through it, to get a design actually that worked. And then he's like, cool, I'll cut you some parts. And he cut me like 5 sets of parts. And this was in, I think, September. And so I got him August or September. I got him in, and I built the knives, and I'm like, God, this is great. They go together so easy. It saves so much sitting at a bandsaw and all the stuff hitting you in the face. And I'm like, cool. And he's like, I said, yeah, these are great. I really appreciate it. Can you make more parts? And he's like, yeah, I should be able to make some more in May. And I'm like, that's kind of rough. It's not going to work for me. So I went online, I guess that night, and started looking at CNCs. And within a month, I had bought one. I'd never seen a CNC working. Maybe I saw one sitting somewhere in a shop, but never seen one, never operated one, no clue at all. But I went ahead and bought one in like December.
Wow.
And got there, and because like Pat said, I can help you set it up and teach you how to use it. So I'm like, okay, it came in December, and he's like, yeah, I'll be there in like late January. Okay. So it sat there in my shop. I had built a new shop because when I was working originally, I was in an old like 2-car garage, and it wasn't insulated. And when I'd be out grinding blades and you'd set them down on something and they'd freeze to it. And, because you dunk them in the water to cool them off and set them down, and then they'd freeze to the table and you'd have to pop them off. And so I insulated that and kept working on it. But, when the wind blows, the wall would move like 4 inches. So you're trying to work on something in a vise and it's like hitting a moving target.
Right.
So eventually I just bit the bullet and built a new shop, and I made it big enough. It's pretty big, but I left it big enough to do ranch stuff. And sometime in like 4 or 5 years, I'd try to work myself into a CNC, but that went out the window. Boom, got the shop done. And a couple of months later, I'm like, got a CNC delivered and it's sitting there.
What year was that, Richard?
So,
I shouldn't ask you that.
It was like 7 years ago.
Okay.
It was like 7 years ago, I think.
2013-ish.
I'm just going to say real quick, I couldn't talk because there was a train going by. It's still going by a little bit, but that class, Richard, was such a disappointment for me. The Rhino class, because I'm sitting over there thinking I'm doing good, and I've got like a little 2D. We were supposed to draw a duck, I think, a rubber duck.
Yeah.
And I had like a little 2D duck, and I was like, yeah, I'm kicking ass. And I look over, and Richard's got like a 3D duck all modeled with flames on it or something.
No, that was Pat. Pat had the fancy one with flames, and then Luke had one that was like out of the book with headphones on it. And I had one that, they're drawing these cool cartoon funky ducks, and I drew something that looked like a freaking duck. I mean, it looked like a duck that you would draw. A real
I had a
duck.
stick figure.
And they're looking
duck.
at me like, you guys don't understand it. And I mean, it's like they're looking at me like I'm the slow kid because, it looks like a duck, and they're drawing this cool stuff. And I have zero artistic ability. I have no artistic ability at all. I can't draw anything. CAD's been a godsend because then I can get something on paper and just keep tweaking it until it looks right, and then till it works right. But we took the class and it was like so over my head because I'd only been looking at Rhino for a little while and no instruction, and these guys have been playing with it for a long time. But I could go enough to keep up.
I think it's hard when you, like, we have that at work a lot where we have engineering tools and software and, data recording equipment, all this kind of stuff. And it's really funny because we'll take like brand new engineers, right? Like, oh, hey, Fred, welcome to the company. Go take these 15 training courses. And in the 15 training courses are like 5 of them where they're being taught how to use equipment, 1, they've never seen before, and 2, like they have no way to actually visualize what they're trying to do. You know what I mean? So there's no connect the dots. And I don't know, it's the whole thing sometimes is missing context. And so they'll take these classes and then they'll go do work for a while and the class didn't help at all. And then they'll go back 2 years later and take the same class and it's like, oh my God, now this makes sense, right? It's like,
yeah.
If you don't have some kind of framework for it all to fit into, then it's like, what am I doing?
Yeah, some sort of context. And Rhino's a funky program as it is, I think.
That's the only thing I've had experience with, so that's all I know. Yeah. It's not even really a regular CAD program. It's more of a rendering, drafting kind of program. And it's got really powerful tools for modeling and stuff, and I don't use any of them.
Are you still using Rhino, Richard?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have not enough internet speed to use Fusion or anything. And if you go to any of the other CAD CAM programs, pretty soon they get, to get like Mastercam for a single shop is like $30,000.
Yeah. Prohibitive.
And another $1,500 a year for just maintenance.
Right.
So for little guys, it's really hard.
Yeah, we were using Rhino. We switched to 360, Fusion 360.
Yeah. I can't. I'd only had, at the time when I was looking at Fusion, I had like 25 gigs a month. And every time I turned on the computer, Fusion would download a 500 megabyte or 1 gigabyte update.
Mhm.
I mean, seriously, it's like, stop it.
Right.
But you couldn't turn it off. Every time you turned it on, boom, there's a gig.
You're eating away at your allocation.
Yeah, it just killed me. So I just stick with Rhino. But yeah, Pat, I had this CNC sitting in my shop for a couple of months. And then Pat came over and came in and he's like, okay, so wait, we'll set it up. So he had some little skates and we lifted it onto skates and moved it over to where it would work best. And then we got it leveled and built a fixture or two for it, and that took pretty much all night. And then the next day he's like doing stuff and he showed me, okay, this is how you load a tool this is how you load a tool into the tool holder. Okay. This is how you tighten the collet. This is how you load a tool in the machine. This is how you set the tool depth. This is how you advance to change tools. This is how you turn the machine on, turn it off. And that's like about a couple of hours of that. And that was my training in how to use the CNC. And then he loaned me a CAM program. And now it is 2.5 hours. So he's like, okay, we've got a drawing here. This is how you import it. Okay. This is how you do it. You set up a tool, you identify the tool, you say how to do it. That was 2.5 hours. He said, I got to go. And he left. And I'm like, okay. I got my used CNC. I bought an older used one because my whole thought process was I don't want to crash a new one. I mean, I don't want to buy a brand new CNC and crash it. So I got it and I spent 3 or 4 days drafting and writing a program to cut clips. First program I did was machine to clips. So I did it and got it all set up. And then I was bugging him with questions back and forth, which is the most amazing thing about the internet. Is I could do something and send him a file and he could look at it and send it back, even though we're like 3.5 hour drive away.
It's a beautiful thing.
It blows my mind because it's just so amazing. And I'm sure, he must have had the patience of a saint because I'm sure I drove him nuts trying to ask these stupid questions again and again and again. But I finally did it, and it's like, you don't know the stress of the first time you ever do a program, and it's like a hour plus long program to cut 10 clips, and you've never done it before, and it's like trying to force myself to push the button.
Yeah.
No, it's like a $25,000 machine, and I can kill it if I do something, one little programming thing, and I'm toast, and my wife's probably going to kill me.
And then you sit there with your hand on the stop button.
Oh, just hovering. Chad Nichols did the same thing for me. He came down. I didn't know anything about CAD. He showed me how to turn on, or CAD cam, CNC, anything. I bought one. He came down for the weekend, showed me how to do stuff. I tried to retain it as much as I could, wrote everything down. But man, after he left, hitting that button, it was hard. Like you said, it was like, this is a brand new machine that I really had no reason to buy. And I'm going to go ahead and try to make something with it. It's been a long road.
Yeah, it's the stress. It's like it's like getting in a car that you had to write a program for it to drive into town, right? And if you miss one turn in the road, it's going to wreck. And And it's like, you can't hit that stop button. He's like, run it at 5% or something. I'm like, dude, it's an hour and a half program for 10 clips. I'd have to be standing there alert for 15 hours or something. This isn't happening. Pat was like, I looked at it. It should be okay. Just hit the button. Close enough.
Encouragement.
So anyway, yeah, after that, it was just learning to design. Like I said, zero artistic ability is horrible. It's a problem. But with designing, I can work with big curves and stuff or straight lines. A lot of my stuff is just like 2 lines, which is harder to design around, but it works for me.
Yeah.
I can't do all that swoopy stuff. It just doesn't work right for me. So after getting the CNC, I mean, like, it suited me working with it, cutting parts and figuring out how to do it and all that kind of thing.
I think, well, like Michael said, I know he struggled with a lot of the same stuff getting started, right? Like, I don't know. How would you describe it, Michael?
Scary as shit.
Yeah, right. Right.
Basically,
Yeah, there you go.
bought this new car for the same, the price of a new truck. It's sitting in there. Like I said, I didn't know a thing about it, and things that's easy now, or that you just like hit a button or whatever, you're like, oh, it's fine, was the most stressful thing in the world. And in your whole path and your whole knife making kind of career depends on how well you can do that. And you're like, well, I have made a huge mistake here. I mean, that's what you're thinking at first.
No, I knew it was the thing for me. I just was afraid I was going to kill it. And Sally, we need 40,000 for a new machine because I broke the last one.
Yeah.
Did you get any backlash at all from customers or?
Oh, tons. Not.
Did you really?
I got backlash from a few customers, but mainly dealers. There were several dealers when I started making like the liner lock types, or I don't call them tactical because my stuff really isn't that tactical, but more modern type knives. I had dealers tell me I was making a horrible mistake, that I needed to stay in my lane and keep making slip joints because I couldn't compete with the guys that were making the other stuff. And it was just a huge mistake. And I'm like, well,
yeah.
This suits me and I'm going to run with it for a while. So we went to, even before I got the CNC, we went to the first US in show we went to. I don't know, it wasn't the first show. It's 2013 or 14 or something. I don't know. No, it was probably 2012 or 13. We went to the USN and I had made some more modern looking knives and a few slip joints, but but other stuff too I had made. And you could see it was pretty rough, but you could see the direction I was going in it. And we still had a portfolio so people could look at old pictures. Everybody else was whipping out smartphones and showing videos of their shop and all this other stuff. And I'm like, well, hell, I had to buy a phone. I didn't have a phone. And not like I'm going to call anybody. But yeah, I went home and got a phone and got on Instagram and Facebook. I don't think I was on any of that stuff. And started taking pictures and posting and promoting the stuff. And just keep after it, and just try to get better and then work on the CNC and try new designs.
Yeah.
I've never been afraid to try new stuff. Just do something different.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to get out of, like you said, your lane. When you're comfortable or doing something like that, it's hard to do it. But at the same time, if what you're doing now makes you happy, you're going to have a better product in the end anyway. So, I mean, why not make that leap?
Yeah, with me, it was just like, it wasn't like a smooth transition into something. It was like hard right turn and just do it, I mean, it was just a total change from what I was doing.
I think that's an interesting difference between your situation, Richard, and what Michael went through, because Michael, his knives, I think his designs are different, but still the same design language as his all made by hand kind of stuff, right? Even though he's using a machine now. But he kind of had to transition an existing path, of design over to the CNC side of things. Whereas in your case, like you said, you didn't start making CNC slip joints per se, right? You went in a completely different direction. So maybe that makes it cleaner. I don't know.
Yeah, well, see, I'd never really designed much. I know Michael, it's one of his issues is like copying designs, but with the slip joints, most of the guys there's a few people making new stuff, but at that time especially, it was all making copies of old patterns. Like right. Tony Bowes, most of what he did was he started out, I think, repairing case knives and fixing them, and he had pieces. So when he started to make his knives, he just used the pieces as patterns. It's not, he wasn't coming up with brand new designs for everything. And some of the stuff I was doing was a lot of Sheffield stuff, the English stuff. It had good lines and nice and long and elegant. Long and thin is elegant in knives and stuff like that. So I was doing that. I was looking for places where other people weren't doing anything. Yeah, so it's not as much people stealing designs in this traditional slip joint world. Especially, some people have their own knives that they make, like Rupel. He makes that trapper, and it looks like a Rupel trapper.
Right.
And quite a few of the people that have studied under him make that same kind of knife. But, I don't think it's an issue for him.
Right.
Me personally, I would never make one that looked like anybody else's if I could help it. Not so much the slip joints, but any other modern knife.
Yeah.
So, you say you're not artistic, but yet you make these very, to me, artistic looking knives in their own right. What do you consider like your design aesthetic? How do you approach building a knife? What comes first, I guess?
Like I say, I like to keep stuff simple. It's just clean. So generally I start with a few big curves. Like on a lot of knives, start with a top line curve, or a compound curve or whatever, and then just work from there. My guideline is usually I say I want a knife with like a 3-inch blade. So I, spec out a line just for distance and then put a big curve on it and then see how that works to get a blade and a handle from that. Yeah, most of my stuff is just really simple. It's just a few lines.
So, but do you approach it like, I need to make a 3-inch bladed knife, and then you go about doing it? Or what's kind of your process there? Is it like, I need to fill this market or this spot, or I want to build a dagger, and then you...
Yeah. Sometimes I go for, try to hit a niche or try to do something that will work. I think that people would want. One of the first ones I did was a Sharpie, I called it. Because I was looking, people at that time, a lot of people had these big, heavy knives, 4-inch blade, 1/4-inch blade stock, or something crazy, or 3/16, and the whole thing weighed about a pound. Well, I'm like, executives or people that have to actually carry a knife in a suit, they can't do that. They might like it at home or whatever to collect it or play with it, but they can't carry it. So I was looking around and thought, I'll make a knife that looks like a pen. You could put in a pen pocket. So I got a Sharpie marker and sat down and measured it and sketched it out and started designing from that. Now, at that time, I wanted I had come from slip joints, and I'd been working on for years, probably like 8 years ago, maybe more. When I first started this kind of stuff, I wanted to make a mechanism that would function like a slip joint, but you didn't have that tedious fitting of the spring. So I was looking around, well, detent balls, that's what holds the blade closed on the others. So I can make one a detent that holds it open and closed. And then you can, open it and close it. So I made some regular knives like that. They were pretty rough. The lines weren't very good design-wise. But then I started doing this, and I worked it out how to do it. And I was making these before I had a CNC. So I was like cutting a little tab inside it with a jeweler saw and putting a detent in there to hold it closed and to hold it open. And then I made it so you could, open it one-handed. It was a 1/2 inch wide. And you could clip it in a shirt pocket. I specifically designed it not locking because a lot of the areas at that time were like New York and stuff. You couldn't have a locking knife. You couldn't have one that locked in the open position. So this was targeted for non-permissive environments, I said. So you could, put it in your pocket like a pen, carry it. Nobody would know you were carrying a knife. You still had a nice knife, and you wouldn't get in trouble for it being locking. And strangely enough, a lot of those knives I was making ended up in the hands of doctors because it was the only knife they could stick in their scrubs and carry it around, and nobody would bat an eye because everybody thought it was just a pen.
Yeah.
So that was designing for a niche market.
Was that probably one that you think took off for you quite a bit as far as like in the EDC market?
No, they didn't. Because people thought it's okay, but it's like, whatever. They didn't understand the double detent mechanism. I came up with that on my own. I think Serge Pachinko, I don't know him. I think he was doing something similar around the same time. But we were both, well, anyway, I was doing it. I was going along, but people didn't understand it. They thought, whatever, it's neat. And I was selling some of them. I mean, they sold well. But nobody was like, oh my gosh, wow, that's so cool. I just kept making some of those, and, I'd make other designs too. And I'm constantly refining what I'm doing as I was learning how to use a CNC, and how to work with all these materials. I had no idea what I was doing with the CNC. I could cut stuff.
Well, you've gotten pretty slick with it.
Yeah, I did it for years, so I became fairly fluid with it.
Well, you're very, when I look at your knives, you're very big in the patterns, tessellation, stuff like that. When I see something like that, I'm like, that's very much a Richard Rogers knife. Mm-hmm. And for someone to say you're not big on, art and stuff like that, I think it speaks volumes to be able to look at something and know, oh, that's a Rogers knife over there. I can tell. And and
like I say, not artistic. I couldn't draw anything. I can't draw stick figures, man. But I can look till the angles look okay. But that was pretty good. I mean, I was kind of happy with that. And then I made another one that was a double detent that you could flip it open with one hand. And I made like 4 of those. And everybody was like, whatever. They didn't like them very much. Although the people that ended up with them loved them. But so I kind of dropped that for a while. And then just went ahead and was making liner locks and trying to figure them out and trying to figure out the geometry of locks and all that kind of stuff. And just working on it, trying a few new designs. Just keep plugging along and constantly refining stuff.
Would you say that there's one design that kind of took off that made it, where you are now, or is it just kind of a slow progression? Because you're obviously very sought after now. You have a very big following, and can you kind of mark that as?
I don't know. The Slim Utility, most people had a very strong reaction to it. They were just the silhouette. They liked it. And, I made some, but they weren't like, oh my God, I have to have it. And then eventually, through the years, it kind of evolved into where it's in high demand now. But I was just always trying different things. Again, that's coming from starting out older. You're probably in the same way. Nowadays, people, I want to be a knife maker. And they design one knife, and then they get parts made or have a CNC, and they just make that one knife over and over and over. And they go to a show, and they have 20 of the same knife on the table. And it's like, when I was starting out, that was like death. You did not want a bunch of knives that look the same.
Right.
Everybody, but back then CNC was like, oh my God, you can't, CNC is cheating. It's horrible. They blew up the Knife Makers Guild over that.
Yeah.
Absolutely destroyed it. Because everybody that wasn't using CNC was jealous of the people that were. And the people that were actually making money. Because way back when we first started this, hardly anybody made a living at it. There were a few, Bob Terzola and a few people, but mainly people, it was like a hobby, or they made them and they made money, but their wife had a job or they had a pension or something.
Yeah.
It's not like you're 25 and like, I'm going to make knives and just head in and expect to make a good living out of it.
Yeah, that's something I think sometimes forget, is this is a career, not just something we do on the side. And it's something we're trying to make money. I'm trying to save money for kids' colleges, just like else out there. So yeah, we are trying to make money at doing this and look for ways to sometimes make it easier on ourselves and make good decisions for our mental health and our business.
Yeah, I see with you, you get in your own way. You get in your own way a bunch, the same way that I do.
Oh, yeah.
Because what we should do is make a batch of knives, make like 15 or 20, and make 10 or 12 of them the same, and then make 2 or 3 fancy, and then just sell them. Mm-hmm. But we get in there, and then you start, I don't want to make them look the same, so I'm going to change this finish and use that handle material and do a different pattern, and all of a sudden you're taking twice as long to make them as you should.
But we're having more fun doing it.
Yeah.
Fun. Put air quotes around fun.
I just,
but
I get
again,
too much of the same flavor.
Right. But commercially, you would make more money if you could just crank out a batch. Don't worry about they're all different. Don't worry about sitting there and sanding some little feature that you put in there. And it's like, because I do the same thing. But yeah, so this is more commercially viable than making it by hand. I probably wouldn't be making knives without a CNC because it's just too much. I just couldn't make any kind of a living doing everything by hand without having all the parts water jetted, or sending some out to get other processes done. It's just too hard for one guy to do it all.
Yeah.
I think one of the,
very much
to Michael's earlier comment, one of the cool things that you do, Richard, that I think it seems like I saw a lot of it on your stuff before I saw it in lots of other places, is, like Michael said, lots of texturing, lots of pattern, trying to use the, I'm going to call it magic of the whole computer control and programming aspect of it to actually make stuff that has some amount of like artistic thing going on too. You know what I mean? Or visually interesting is probably a better way to say it.
Yeah, everything's about light in ornamentation. It's how the light hits stuff. So if you can make it bounce around, it really brings stuff to life. Yeah, I'm again, a lot of what I'm doing or have been doing is learning how to use a CNC. How do you make a surface with wavy lines? How do you make a surface with weird grooves and stuff and flared out things? And Pat showed me how to do some of that. And again, it's like a 20-minute course. And okay, this is how you do it. Click, 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 click. And I'm like trying to keep up in my brain. But evidently I retained enough of it to make it work. Yeah, a lot of the people, when they were telling me that, oh, you're going to be one of those CNC guys. God. Yeah. And what they say always when they think CNC, especially 5 or 6 years ago, was like they were expecting stonewashed frame locks and 50 of them all the same.
Right.
And I'm like, CNC is just a tool. It depends on how you use it. Now, I don't think my knives look real factory plain stuff. So I'm not making, 200 stonewashed frame locks. Hey, I'm trying to do different stuff. And like I say, learning how to do it, always pushing. I've gone now learning about mechanics, how the frame locks work and stuff. Especially with small frame locks, because I make a lot of smaller knives. I want knives that people can carry easily. 3-inch blade kind of thing. On a lot of smaller knives, especially frame locks, when people hold it and try to flip it, every time they put their fingers on the lock bar and then they try to flip it. And the harder they try to flip it, the harder they hold that lock bar in. Right. And they just start fighting themselves. And they say, this knife won't work. It won't flip. And you try to explain it, and it's like, nope, no. So what I ended up doing is using a big inlay, which solved a few problems for me. The inlay keeps your hand off the actual lock bar. It makes you can cut like a few frames at the same time and then give them all a different appearance. And what you end up with is a lock bar that's very, very stiff because it's thin where the inlay is, but on the edge, it's really thick. So you got a real strong, stiff lock bar, which makes the knife really solid in your hand. And one of the reasons I went to a full inlay is because I know you guys have had somebody call up and say, hey, I just got this knife and I love it, but I really want a different handle material on it. So, can you change the G10 out for like $40 or something? And they don't realize you have to redo the whole knife if you want to change the scales.
Right.
So this allows me to I can cut a set of scales and send them off. I've sent them to like Germany and stuff. Because if somebody in Germany sends you a knife, it takes forever and it's expensive. And this way I can send them the handle scales. They can change them their own and they have a knife that looks very good.
Yeah.
Or it looks like they want it. I've been working on making knives more flexible. I wanted people to be able to reverse the clip without it looking like, without you leaving a big hole in one side of the knife.
Yep.
Or remove the clip and carry it without a clip because not everybody does. Or if you're in New York, some people were asking for knives without clips because the police would confiscate them if they saw a knife, a flipper with a clip.
Clip to your pocket.
They'd see the clip on the guys. Yeah. So I finally developed I made standoffs that are the same diameter as a button head screw. So I can put the clip on standoffs and use that to secure it. And they're the same. So the clip can be positioned on either side of the knife. Or you can remove the whole thing and then just put a couple of button head screws in there. And it doesn't look like anything's missing. So I'm always pushing on stuff like that or trying to figure out knives are like a puzzle. You know, you're always trying to solve some problem.
Very cool.
Yeah, I really like both of those things, Richard. It, when you showed them to me the first time, I was like, wow, this is so cool. And I think that's one of the things that you've done really good is innovate things that should have been obvious, but weren't to anyone.
Yeah, it's like I say, I'm weird. I'm like super introverted, so I'm not paying attention a lot to what's going on. Like some people sit there and they scroll through all the other makers to see if what they're coming up with and to get ideas and stuff. And I'm like, I don't really watch that much. I'm just off in my own little world.
That's a happy world.
Yeah, it's a place to be right now.
Yeah, at the moment.
Yeah, it's like, the big coronavirus shutdown is like, there's more people here than usual. I see more people than I usually do. It's like, y'all people need to go stay at your own homes. Just go. Leave me alone. My son had a kid, so I've got a grandson, and he's like 14 months old now. And he's neat, but man, they just sit him down in the knife shop and off he goes. And I'm like losing my mind trying to keep a handle and stuff from falling on him.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't touch those titanium splinters on the ground.
Right.
No. Don't eat the coolant.
Grandson's super cute, man. I love the pictures that you posted of him before. Every time I see him, he's in a cowboy hat and little teeny cowboy boots. It's awesome.
Yeah. He's definitely a free range kid. His mom is not a helicopter mom. She's like, sit him down and okay, kind of keep an eye on him, make sure he doesn't die. But I mean, he's incredibly strong. He started walking a month and a half ago, maybe, but he's like really strong, and he'd been walking for 2 or 3 weeks, and he grabs a push broom at the shop, holds it up in one hand and starts walking around with it. It's crazy strong for a little kid. Most kids, they hold in a cup and they start staggering around. But
it's awesome.
Yeah, he's great, but not conducive to knife production or my stress level. It's like, no, don't touch that. Don't touch that. Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, that's
because
funny.
everything in a knife shop's going to hurt somebody.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like COVID. I leave my ranch unless there's some issue. I leave my ranch like maybe once a month.
Right.
I just don't want to go anywhere. Sally goes out, gets groceries and stuff, but like I don't need to go.
That's sort of the arrangement we have going on. I stay here and they go.
Right.
Yeah. Good times.
Michael drives his truck every few weeks just to make sure the tires are back round again and then parks it.
Got to get the rust off the rotors.
Yeah. Sally is left here around 5. She has to take her mom to Philadelphia. Sally's brother had a heart attack a month ago or so and died. He was 51, just out of the blue. Just
crazy.
Boom.
Wow.
And of course, with COVID, they couldn't go over there to deal with anything. And this was the first time they could have a funeral service. So they're flying to Philadelphia tomorrow morning early.
Wow.
So that's kind of stressful. I don't really kind of nervous about them being out at this time,
Yeah, right.
Everything's unsettled and you've got the COVID people and
yeah, it's a weird time to have to travel and, I don't know. It's weird everywhere, like you said, right? Lots of weird stuff going on in society, lots of like resurgence with the COVID thing going on. And it's like, ugh, man.
But it's crazy. But so, yeah, she's supposed to get back late Monday. So keeping my fingers crossed.
Yep. Sean, you wanted to ask something in here?
So you have designs with CRKT. How did that come about, and has it had any effect on your custom market?
A little more notoriety in the custom market, but I don't know how much the custom market's probably improved it. CRKT, I was looking to expand the business, how you can get money. I I went to, or I sent emails and tried to contact people at Kershaw and Boker and ZT Knives and CRKT. Luke had a deal with CRKT, and he gave me an introduction. So I went with them because basically they're the only ones who would meet with me. I had a couple of designs, and they showed them like 3 or 4, and they picked 2 and looked at them, and we'll get back to you in a few months. And then eventually they picked up 2. But the weird thing is with factories, or with, the factory deal, is their lead time is 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah.
So you design a knife and give it to them, and then they're going to introduce it usually around SHOT Show 2 years later. And it's just, I'm used to, okay, I'll go design a knife, spend a few days, cut parts, make the knife, 3 or 4 days, I've got an actual thing in my hand. And with them, it's, the lead time is just crazy. It's a real adjustment for me.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, they made, they picked up 2. And so then it was like a couple of years, 18 months later, I think, they introduced them at SHOT, and they introduced them, and we promoted them, and they sold okay through the first year, but weren't making, it's not like real lucrative. They were making some money, which was good, but neither one was a hit. The next year at Blade, I showed them the Sharpie, the double D-temp folder, and they liked it. Doug said he really liked it, but they can't sell a slip joint. They've tried, and they had poor luck with them. So they said they can't sell a knife without a lock. So they just sent it back to me, and I'm like, well, let's make it lock. So I went and redesigned it into a liner lock, and sent it back to him like 2 weeks later. I mean, it's like, let's design it and make it work and turn around.
Right.
And then like 2 or 3 months later, they got back to me and like, yeah, well, this is pretty neat. We'll try it. And then again, it's like a year and a half, 2 years later, they introduced it. And they introduced it at SHOT, and they sold out of the first run. And then that became their CEO. And they sold out the first run. And then, so they ordered more. So that takes like months. And then they sold out of that. And it just kept slowly building until it became a pretty big hit for them.
That's cool. What were the first 2, Richard?
The first 2 were what I would call the 4F. It was their Maven, they called it. They messed up the names. I had the 4F. The 4F was mine, and then the Vector. It was the 4F and the Vector. But anytime you do anything with a factory, they say, okay, yeah, this is a great knife, but that name sucks. I mean, you spent like a month trying to figure out a name for it, and it's like, okay, that sucks though. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So we go through and try to figure out different names for them, and came up with a Quattro for the mid 4F and the Maven for the Vector.
Okay.
But then somehow they screwed up the names and switched them.
Oh, really?
So the Quattro became the Vector, but they're like, yeah, we mixed up the names, but we're already through into production, so it's too late to change it. Oops. It's like, no big deal. It's just kind of funny. Takes a while for me to keep them straight in my head.
Yeah. It seems like the 4F was a good model in general for you, right? It seemed like that got some traction with people. I mean, even on the custom side, and then the fact that it converted it into a production knife. The 4F was really, the first knife I designed, I think, was the Arc, which I called it an Arc because it had one round line on the top and one kind of straight line on the bottom. Like I say, simple lines for me.
And then I did a Tangent, which was kind of swoopy, but not too much interest. Then I talked to Bob Terswell, and he says, everybody needs a 4-inch bladed tactical knife. You're too small. You got to make them big. So I made a big 4F, and that was one of the first ones I really tried to introduce it.
Yeah.
And, those sold pretty well, but it was just too big for me and for a lot of people. So I shrunk it down and called it a mid 4F, a mid-sized. And then that was pretty good.
Yeah.
That's, people have always been buying the stuff I've been making. So they don't go rabid for it, though.
Yeah. It's certainly one that, like Michael said, it's a Richard Rogers knife when you see it, right? It's distinctive shaped. I mean, the aesthetic of it just fits with the rest of your other stuff, right? They're all clearly from the same brain or lineage or, design, whatever you want to call it.
Twisted mind, yeah.
But I mean, it seemed like there were lots of them out there, right? The 4F, 4F mid, they got traction and people really liked them. At least when I look at what I see people were carrying or whatever, people liked it a lot. It's a cool knife.
That Arc was the first one I saw.
Right.
Keith Curry had one. He brought it over and he's like, check out this little knife. It was very cool.
Very thin. Yeah, that's kind of my aesthetic. Cleaner lines and just real thin and lightweight. And the current version of the Arc has a kind of innovative deal for a lanyard hole. Some people wanted the lanyard hole and some people didn't, I was trying to keep it clean, so I designed a backspacer that's flush with the knife all around, but if you want to, it has different screw positions, so you just slide it back and then you get a thong hole sticking out the back slightly.
Okay.
So that was pretty neat. Again, it's like a little puzzle to solve.
Right. So the 4F, the mid, I guess, and the Vector were the two first CRKT knives.
Right.
Then the Executive, which was what? Basically what became the CEO, which was your Executive flipper, or was it?
Yeah, it was the Executive.
Okay.
And again, the early Executive is a lot. We called it the Executive. I'm like, hey, there's got to be a niche to fill with a knife you can carry anywhere that doesn't scream knife. We even had a few policemen pick up those because they could keep it in their shirt pocket. It didn't look like anything, but if they needed a knife or a last ditch thing or something that people would overlook, they had it. Right.
Yeah, and it's not like it was a tiny blade. It just folded into a super slim handle, right? There's plenty of edge to it.
It's a full size knife. I kept the blade like just under 3 inches, just for legal reasons.
Yeah.
Or it was supposed to be under 3 inches. I don't know. It's like, I know Michael gets too, I think he gets caught. I call it a design loop where you start designing a knife and then you get it pretty much nailed in like you want. And then you start to add a clip, and the clip, to get it to fit right, you have to change a little something. And then you change that line or change the screw position. And when you change the screw position, that changed something else. So then you need to tweak something else. Then all of a sudden the blade shape has to change a little bit. And then, oh no, the backspacer won't fit like that. So you just keep shuffling stuff around.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And waste lots of time.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
So this is kind of a interesting thing. Some makers do this, and some guys design specific stuff for production deals. Did you end up finding that it worked okay to have CRKT production stuff of knives that you still wanted to make as customs?
Yeah, because they're so different that they're not using carbon fiber. It hasn't affected the custom market at all.
Okay.
As far as I know, because it's clearly such a different level of finish and fit and steels and everything that most of the factory the CRKT style audience is just like regular guys that they're not necessarily collectors or anything.
Right.
They just go into a store and, hey, that knife looks good. I need a knife, and they buy it and do it. They don't know from steel or anything. And it's just a totally different group of people buying both of them. I mean, some of our collectors buy the factory stuff just because they want something to carry around or give to friends or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
But
version of
it hasn't been. Yeah, I haven't like, oh, this is a CRKT knife. I don't want to buy one from you.
Right. Right.
That hasn't happened as far as I know.
Well, like you said, whether it's materials or some of the pretty creative texture work or other stuff, right? It certainly, I think, in hand, really different, right? Like a 4F custom and a production version of it, they're pretty different knives seen in hand. I think sometimes people get nervous about it because it's like, well, it's the same shape, but it kind of looks like the same knife. And it's like, yeah, but once you get the thing in hand, they're not the same.
I don't think it's really been an issue.
Yeah.
If you were, getting a lot of stuff, taking all your regular customs to Riot and just converting them to, OEM productions, that would probably be an issue.
Yeah.
Now we did the Slim Utility. That was one of the early models I made, and CRKT passed on it. It was too small. They didn't like it. They passed on it twice, but it had always been a fairly popular model. So, and there was enough demand that we wanted to try an OEM, so we picked that one. And it's weird balancing stuff. Do you take an existing knife? Do you design an all new one? But it's hard to, invest a bunch of money, like $30,000 in a brand new knife and just hope it sells.
Right.
You don't know whether it's going to be popular or a flop. So we tried that, and that we had some made as an OEM, and that was an adventure, but it was successful. They sold out really fast. So, I don't know. It's always choices and balancing different stuff. I don't know that there's any perfect answer.
Yeah. So the production thing, the OEM production thing that you did was the utility.
Yeah, the Slim Utility.
Yeah.
And we called it the OEM Slim. That was the name. There is no question that it is an OEM knife.
Right.
I've always been extremely open about what I'm doing, and I don't hide anything. We're really straightforward about doing stuff. I'm not lying about how I make it or who I get. I'm pretty much, most of the stuff I make is me in a shop. Sally tried to help some, but it's hard to work around somebody else's schedule for me. I'm not working like making 20 knives and then leaving them there for her to anodize or something. It's like, let's go. I'll get to them in a couple of weeks. No.
Richard, one of the things I thought was interesting with the OEM, and I guess we can edit this out if you don't want it kept, but it seemed like in the group there was a lot of people that were upset because you didn't have enough of them made. And I found that interesting because people don't realize what a financial investment that is and how scary it can be, because you don't know if they're going to sell, and it's a major investment.
Yeah, it's like, oh, they'll sell. It's like, no, you don't know they'll sell.
Yeah,
you don't. But
terrifying.
We keep with our thing. We priced it fairly, what I thought was very fair, which was, they went crazy. I mean, people were immediately turning them for over twice what we were selling them for, and I'm like, okay, guys. But it was weird. One of the reasons we did the thing was to keep the prices of the handmade ones from going crazy, right? You don't want your stuff to get super high overpriced, because then eventually it'll crash or something will happen and people will get mad or hurt or something. So we were trying to diffuse some of that. But then these went crazy too. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the answer is.
You can never make everyone happy.
No, you can't. You just have to do your best and go on.
Yeah.
It's easy to armchair quarterback that and look back. Hind vision is 2020, but like I said, it's scary if you're putting. It's a significant amount of money, and it's a gamble almost, you know. So yeah, I felt for you guys.
And it's a significant amount of time, because you've got to deal with them, and there's a freaking huge time lag. You know, they're replying to me at like 1 a.m, and I don't get to it till the next morning, and then they reply at, so there's a huge time lag. But just dealing with all the details,
Right.
boxes and packaging, and how do you finish it, and making this right and making that right. It's a significant time investment. It really is. Yeah, and then people are like, why didn't you make 1,000? They could have sold. And well, you don't know they're going to make 1,000.
Right.
And I don't really want to get over $100,000 in knives, on a gamble.
Exactly.
I'll gamble with something. 100,
Yeah.
100 and whatever grand it would have worked out to. Yikes. That's big money. Plus, Sally would have had a seizure. She had to package 1,000. We did 200, and she's like, "Oh my God!"
Yeah.
We had to break it up into stages.
Right.
But originally, we tried to make. I was wanting to avoid China just because everybody's doing that and whatever. We tried Italy. That took a year trying to work with them and figure it out. But the cost per piece from Italy would have made them just way too expensive.
Yeah.
Well over twice what it would have cost us to get them made in China. And I didn't want to hit that higher dollar. I would have had to sell them for too much. I wasn't comfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, especially when it's supposed to be a price point thing and all that stuff, right?
Well, yeah, you got to work with that. Now, we kept our price low because we were selling them ourselves. So essentially, it's like a wholesale price for everybody. If I had to deal with, if I had to sell them through dealers and stuff or distributors, well, then we would have had to raise the price.
Right.
Because, everybody has to make money.
Yep.
But fortunately, we had enough of a following that people got them, and so far the response has been very good.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. You mentioned Sally a couple times. For people that aren't familiar with your stuff or haven't followed your work closely, Sally's kind of a key piece of the whole puzzle, right?
Oh, yeah. She without her, I'd be stabbing people or things. I can stay out in my shop, and she handles the emails. She handles the contacts with people, and because when I know if you guys sit in your shop and all of a sudden you start getting messages and text messages, and some guys gotta work in the swing shift or something, and he's got nothing to do, and hey, I'll just want to visit, and I'm like, okay, I can visit with people, but I can either visit or actually make stuff. I can't do both.
Right.
I can only do one thing at a time.
Yep.
So Sally takes up all the slack, and she's really good with people. And yeah, I couldn't do this without her. She's like a huge part of it.
Yeah, she does a great job with that stuff, and like you said, it helps make a very and I'm not saying that you're not, Richard, but she's a very personable face of the business, right? She projects a good feeling with folks. I think that's a good thing. You guys make really good partners.
We complement each other pretty well. I can stand there and she can visit with people. It's great. But no, she works. She's really good with people, and she enjoys talking to them and visiting with them. And she's outgoing and all this stuff, and so it works out really well.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys do it. I don't know how individual makers do it, handling everything themselves. Because people think, oh, make a knife, be a knife maker and make knives. No, you're going to be a knife maker and answer emails and take pictures and promote it on Instagram and Facebook and deal with people and answer instant messaging and order materials and design stuff and do machine maintenance and order belts and supply. I mean, actually making knives is like half of it. You spend half your time doing other stuff.
Right.
Yeah, people don't realize that.
Yeah, I think maybe we've said this on the show before. What's the saying? Something like behind every knife maker is a great woman or a great partner, right? I think for lots of people that's true, and the help they get from their family is sort of the glue that keeps it all together.
Yeah. She's, like I said, she's a huge part of the business, because it frees me up to actually produce stuff.
Yep.
It's hard to do everything yourself. It really is.
We were talking about Sally, and I've been very fortunate to hang out with you guys at the shows, and had shared many meals. And I think you're right. I think Sally, you guys complement each other perfectly. And she likes black Jelly Bellies, so the licorice flavor. It's the best.
So you have something in common. Is that what you're trying to say, Tom?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I always say that I hand the people the knife and they hand her the money, so that makes her happy. I kind of get left alone and make knives. She gets all the money. It's like a system.
That's perfect.
Yes.
Good system.
Everybody wins.
Yeah.
All right. So, Richard, we usually ask some kind of fun or goofy questions in our interview episodes. I think that's about where we are, unless you had something else you wanted to cover.
I don't think so. We're going to be getting ready for our annual holiday fundraiser thing in the first week of December. So that'll be going on.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So for people who aren't familiar, what is that all about?
We started a fundraiser years ago because we're very rural, very poor. And rather than raising money and send it off, we started raising money for like the Giving Tree. They had a Giving Tree at the library because Toys for Tots didn't come here.
Okay.
There wasn't a Toys for Tots program. So we started raising money for that, and we'd go in and just take all the tags that nobody else got and go buy presents and stuff for the kids. And we did that for a few years, and then the fundraiser started to take off and get more money. Well, there's not a lot of people here, so we buy all the presents and still have money. So we started giving part of it for the Giving Tree, and then part to like local food banks.
Okay.
And then so far we do, food banks, because like I say, it's a really poor state. If it wasn't for like Mississippi, we'd be 50th in everything, because New Mexico's either 48 or 49 in most everything.
Yeah.
And then Sally is a big supporter of the local library. And here, again, it serves a lot of important functions. It's the only place around. It has free Wi-Fi and internet and computers that people can get on. And they have summer programs and different things for kids to do, because there's not a lot of stuff to do around here. So she's supported that, a lot of stuff. So some of the money goes to that. So we keep the money here and just try to help the community.
Yeah. Very cool. So how's that work, Richard, for people who aren't familiar with how you do it? How will they see that, or how can they find that? Or
we have a website. It's richardrogersknives.com, and there's a tab at the top that says Annual Holiday Fundraiser, and you can look at that, and it describes everything. And we'll make an announcement in our Facebook group and on Instagram, and here I think we have a place where you can subscribe to a newsletter or something.
Okay. So hit the website, watch social media.
Yeah.
People, if they're interested in your work and stuff, they can find you on Instagram. It's Richard Rogers Knives, I assume, on Instagram.
Yeah, richardrogersknives.com.
Okay.
On Facebook, it's Richard Rogers Knives. On Instagram, it's Richard Rogers Knives.
There you go.
It's pretty uniform across the deal. That should be easy to find.
Yeah. Well, very cool. It's the stuff that you do for the holiday thing they're really beautiful pieces that you make, and like you said, the money all goes to great causes. So it's always good to see you guys do well with it.
We do a knife, and then I do some Zerk ornament kind of things, and a bunch of either coins or tags, dog tags, something like that.
Did you get your instructions for this year? I was saying you're going to get a list, right?
Yes. Yes, she's done it. It's like, okay. I told her last year, it's like, okay, I'm going to make I think tags this year instead of coins. Okay. And then it's like, okay, but what snowflake ornaments are you going to make? I'm like, I wasn't going to make them. Yeah, I already promised people you're going to make them. Okay. It's an annual thing. We're making them every year. It's like, oh, okay.
Right.
Which I don't mind making them, but the designing them, because I'm not artistic, is just, I'll spend days trying to find or draft the right image.
Right.
And it's just like, oh.
And you make them different
The
every
actual
year,
making stuff is easy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of bounced around at first, but now we're trying to do a annual theme, with the same kind of feature on all the tags and same kind of different ornament every year.
I was going to say, oh, that's really cool. And then I expect Richard to say, that's a pain in the ass.
Well, I don't, it's like, I don't mind making them, but the designing, stuff like snowflakes and designing a new unique one every year is tough. It's a lot of work.
Right.
But, we enjoy it, and we like giving back to the community.
Yeah.
And the collectors and the whole EDC community is so generous. It is just crazy how generous they are. And bringing the money here makes a huge difference to the community.
Yeah, like you said, if in an area where there are not a lot of resources and, if income levels are super low, it doesn't take a lot, right? Especially to help make kids feel happy with the holidays or whatever, right?
Oh, yeah.
It can make a big difference real quick.
Yeah, last year we gave money to help support the Toys for Tots in Catron County. It's the next county over. And the woman who runs it, she works hard, but she was just really struggling with stuff. And then so Sally got together with her and did it, and the woman started crying, because she was just so grateful, because, they were trying to figure out how to get all those kids a present.
Yeah, it's like you said, the entire community is always super, super supportive of that stuff. It seems like there's more and more of them all the time, and somehow people still find a way to dig some money out and try to help support. And, when it's for causes like what you guys support, or like, Michael does this basically kids lunch thing for school that he's done support for before. It's easy to feel good about doing that stuff, right? You're actually making a difference for other human beings, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, we try, it's just, we're try to be generous.
Yep. All right. So we usually have some fun questions that we hit on when we get toward the end of an interview. So Michael, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I got one here. Now, if money wasn't an object, what machine would you buy for your shop?
I don't know. Really, I'd buy a couple of machines if money was no object, as long as I could buy a shop elf to teach me how to work it,
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at, I've got a mini mill. It's an older mini mill.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was looking to buy them, I talked to Brian Fellholter and Jens Anso and other people I'd known. And it's like, how is this? Is 10 tools enough? Oh man, 10 tools is plenty. You never use 10 tools in making a knife. Yeah, I know. And then I'm like 6 months in, I'm like, I need more tools. What are you talking about? And then I talked to them and he's like, oh man, yeah, I need like 20 tools at least. And I'm like, oh, now you tell me.
Right.
But, so I'd really like something with more tools. And,
yeah,
all these people, the true machinists always scoff at Haas machines. It's like, it's disposable. It's not one of these high-end, super accurate things. But I'm like, it's been so good to me. I'm sure that I could afford a new one, but learning how to run all that stuff, like a 4th axis or a 5th axis even. And then a couple of years ago, Sally's probably ready to kill me. I picked up an old wire EDM machine, but then it's like I got it's been just sitting there because I see all the nice things I can do with it, but I have to stop everything I'm doing and redo getting power from the pole into the shop. I got to run more lines and figure out the phase converter and all that kind of thing, and then learn how to use it. And, for making slip joints and things, it would just be beautiful. But like, again, I've never even seen a wire EDM work, but I figure I can run it if I take the time, but I just haven't had the time.
Right. Yeah.
Just imagine a stack of locks getting cut.
Sean, you've run one.
Yeah, and if it was only that fucking simple and worked that nice.
Yeah.
I'm serious, man.
But
The more you run them, the better they are. They're made to be ran constantly. And if you have one you're running intermittently, you're going to be constantly troubleshooting it seems to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the machine I'd buy is a really good shop elf machinist who knew how to run all this stuff.
Hired gun.
Yeah. God, that'd be nice. So I don't have to learn everything all the time. I mean, every time I turn around, I'm having to learn a whole new something. And it gets tiring after a while.
Yeah.
One of my first exposures to CNC machining was at the Blade Show. They gave they had one of their little seminars on CNC. And one of the guys speaking in it was Joe Heidevick. And he ran a big EDM shop. And so after the thing, I got a hold of him and said, look, see these little shields in all these slip joint knives? He's like, yeah. So they're a real pain in the butt to cut and then inlay. Because at that time, everybody was just, you'd glue the shield to the handle material and then scribe around it and then knock the shield off and then go in with a Dremel or something and cut out all the material. And that took forever. So I said, look, can you cut these shields? Yeah. Okay. Now what I also need is a hardened template so I can put the template on the knife and then use a router or something to go around in it and cut out the profile. So I don't have to spend 2 hours scraping out bone or pearl or something to make it fit. And he's like, yeah, I can do that. So I went home and traced a bunch of shield patterns, some of which I got from Tony Bowes, and just sent them to him. And so then he cut out some templates and he cut the shields out. I had to send him the material to do it and get it all screwed together so he could cut a bunch at once. And they were working good. And then all of a sudden he called me and said, "Hey, do you mind if I send these to other people?" And it's like, no. So then he started cutting them, and as a system, it worked pretty well. And so at one time, most of the slip joint people were using those.
Oh, wow.
I imagine they still are.
Check that out.
And that might be cheating, but man, sign me up.
Yeah, sign me up for cheating, right?
Well, when you're spending half the time of a knife trying to get the inlaid shield just right, it's crazy.
Yeah. No, for sure. Tom, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, Richard, I've got a question, and mine is one that I'm always kind of interested in. What's your favorite material, and then what's your favorite blade stock? Like
Material
steel.
for handles?
Yeah, just or whatever, bolsters, handles.
For steel, I've rather than trying to keep 2,000 steels around and keep them sorted out, I mainly use CTS XHP. For other steels on slip joints when I was making them, it was usually like ATS and stuff like that. For real using knives, I used to use the A2 because it was real fine grained, and even though it's stained, it would hold an edge. It'd take a real good edge and hold it. So for like using knives, I like A2 quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a really good steel.
Yep.
Handle material, I really like the synthetics because they're structural, like carbon fiber or the G10s and stuff. For fancy, I like pearl, mother of pearl is real nice, and some woods. I'm going to start using more pearl and wood in some projects just because I like it so much.
Yeah.
Some of the prettiest material I ever used is tortoise shell. I found somebody gave me an old woman's purse that was just big slabs of tortoise shell. I mean, I don't know what year it was from, but it was old. And you'd take the tortoise shell and then get it fit and flattened and everything, and then cover it with gold leaf on the back. And then when you polished it, it'd be translucent. You'd hit that the crinkled gold underneath it, and it was just gorgeous. Very warm handle material.
Pretty.
Stag's pretty, but I have huge issues with it here because it's so dry here. When you put stag on something, then it goes somewhere else and it swells. Same thing with ivory. My humidity might be 6% here when I'm putting a knife together.
Wow.
So it goes someplace wet, and that stuff, the natural materials are going to swell.
With your blade steel, are you having any issues getting XHP right now?
Oh, I do.
I haven't. I would need to order some more because for a while there it was just hard to get.
Yeah, I couldn't find any for quite a while.
Huh.
It's just SB Specialty Metals, and I guess Dallas is where I've been getting it. But you can talk to them and pre-order it, and then they'll get it to you when they get it in.
Oh yeah.
But
a great steel.
XHP, it's very fine grained, and it holds a good edge, and it's easy to heat treat. I mean, it gets hard.
Yeah, and even with the acetone, like cryo, it would, when I was heat treating it, would gain a point or two. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. It gets hard. It's been a really beautiful steel to work with. I use some of the General Damascus, some of Chad's, some Mike Norris, and then I use a lot of Damasteel. I like Damasteel quite a bit because it's very consistent.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what'd be really cool, Richard, is one of those executive knives with ironwood. That'd make a pretty knife.
Yeah.
And I think by tortoise shell you meant pin shell.
No. Pin shell's a shell. Tortoise shell's from the endangered whatever. It's probably illegal now, but back
Yeah,
when I
that's what
was
I'm
using
saying. I
it.
think it's called pin. Yeah.
Well, no, this was years ago before it. I mean,
Yeah.
the antique stuff. Pin shell is really cool. Some of it looks like tortoise shell, but you can't get it in big chunks.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody uses tortoise shell anymore, which is probably better for the tortoises. Actually, they're sea turtles or something. They're like diamond something. Anyway.
Michael was trying to save you from calling yourself an eco-terrorist or something.
I didn't. This was 20 years ago, and I didn't go club a turtle. It was from a turtle that died back in the 1920s or something. I still think I have parts of the purse where you can see I cut it out.
Sins of the past.
That's all stuff a turtle clubber would have in place.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Out here in the middle of New Mexico at 7,000 feet, I have a lot of access to sea turtles.
I always wonder where they came from.
You know, if one ever made it to you.
Yeah, exactly. So you're saying you took long journeys to club sea turtles. That is just sick.
That's a lot of rage.
No, I sent Sally out to get the sea turtles.
No mercy.
Ouch.
Too funny.
But yeah, you can't use that stuff anymore. You just see it on some old the antique knives, and it's basically like horn. It's the same kind of stuff, but it's gorgeous. It's really pretty stuff.
Richard, I want to
use it.
Yeah, never use it. I just want to make sure that you understand that Sally likes the show, so she's going to hear that you said she's clubbing sea turtles.
Throw her under the bus. She looks so sweet and innocent that nobody would
mistake her for a sea clubbing fiend.
Turtle clubber.
Right.
Although she'd probably volunteer to go to a beach somewhere to look for them.
There you go. That's the gig.
Call me 2 months later. I'm still looking. I haven't found any.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. Too funny. Sean, you got a question?
Yeah. If you could work with any maker, past or present, on a collab, who would it be?
Time machine permitted, right?
Oh, yeah. The laws of time and space don't apply to us.
I don't work well with others, but, like Wolfgang Lochner. I've seen some stuff of his that's just so perfect it makes you want to cry. I mean, it's just so good.
Yeah. Every
line goes somewhere. When you look at a knife, if you're looking at design, your eye wants to complete lines. They don't like lines it doesn't like lines that just shoot off and stop. And on some of his daggers and stuff, you can see that the lines come off of the blade, and if you continue them out, way out, they all bring back to somewhere on the handle. It's just amazing the flow he can get. I don't know. I don't pay attention to I love Sinkovich, Dmitry. He's a nice guy, and some of his stuff is just incredible.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about where your designs are, Richard. I think it's cool to me that I could easily see your stuff fitting with Sinkovich, right? Which is kind of, like you said, nice lines, pretty in a modern-ish kind of way, right? And at the same time, fitting with something like a Lochner or the Art Deco-y art knife side of things, right? I think you're kind of in an interesting crossroads of that world, like where you could either one of those would work. I think.
Yeah, I'm really wanting to work on the Art Deco kind of stuff. It suits me. It's very structural. A lot of it's linear.
Yeah,
so it would work well on a lot of the stuff I do.
Yeah, it would be very natural progression from your shapes that you use now.
Yeah. I had one at TKI that I went that way with. And it was pretty, it didn't look like much, but it was pretty complicated because it had inlays and it had like 4 inlays stacked in like 70 thousandths.
Yeah.
Which was a trick to figure out how to get it in there and still not make it thick.
Very cool. All right. Richard, do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about? I think we're just about wrapped up.
One of the episodes of Mark of the Maker that really was good for me was that mental health one that Michael and Sean did. That was good because it's like, again, I'm on my own little world and I'm not talking to people. So it's nice to hear that I'm not the only one dealing with some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that episode showed
thanks.
us that it is far more common than anyone would have anticipated.
Yeah. We had lots of people reach out about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. Sally usually just hits me in the head and says, go back out to the shop. Mental health adjustment.
Yeah, there you go. Realignment, they call that.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, we thank you for taking the time to chat with us and walk through a bunch of history and very interesting stuff. I think people will really enjoy hearing it.
Yeah.
I think it was a good conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, hopefully I wasn't too boring.
No.
Oh, no, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Like I say, I've listened to all the episodes because it's the podcast that is from the maker's perspective, not collectors, because when they start talking the ZT1703A, and I'm like, I have no clue. I'm listening, I'm doing something in the I can't go to the computer and go figure out what that is.
Yeah.
So this one deals with stuff that I deal with.
Right. I think we send a lot of people to the computer on some of the topical episodes.
Oh, I'm sure.
With looking stuff up and everything else. But yeah. Well, thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. And, I wanted to mention something here too before we wrap up. I know Michael was on and I was on and Sean was on. I don't know if Tom, if you had a chance to check it out, but we had posted in our Facebook group about Rachel Parikh was part of a little webinar thing that she did earlier this evening about the Qatar knife and its history. And she and another historian just kind of scratched the surface of that very interesting ethnic knife. And so if you haven't heard of what I'm talking about, whether it's through Instagram or through our Facebook group, we have a link in the Facebook group. I'm going to try to put one on Instagram as well. But that presentation is very much worth watching. I think it was very, very interesting to hear that history and a bunch of the detail and a bunch of different aspects that I had no prior knowledge of. It sounded like you took a lot away from it as well, Sean.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. I recommend it. And definitely watch the video. They show some absolutely stunning examples of the type.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely worth checking out.
I've got to watch it. It sounds pretty interesting.
Dude, you dig it. Guarantee.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many neat things out there, historical. It's just amazing. I have a friend, Vince Evans, who makes a lot of historical pieces. He just does amazing, complicated sword and knife work. It's just amazing. And so it's Vince Evans. If you have a chance, check him out because it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, cosign. You definitely should be checking out his work and be aware of who he is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Richard, for joining us. And as always, people, if they want to see some of Richard's work, Richard, maybe after we get this published, you can show some, like the 14-blade knife and make a post or have Sally show some stuff. Would be really cool for people to be able to connect the dots on some of those earlier pieces.
Yeah, on the website now, you can get in the gallery. There's a gallery tab at the top, and it has some of the older knives I've made, some of which are pretty complicated.
Yeah.
The barrel knife was a challenge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the barrel knife is like, it almost looks like a grappling hook with the blades out at the one end.
Well, no, they open all the way. It's a barrel knife. It was just like a fancy pen knife,
Yeah.
When the steels weren't good and you had to sharpen a lot of quills, they just put a knife with, you just use it, sharpen your quill, and then fold it up and pull out the next one.
Yeah.
But the trick on that was figuring out how to make liners. Bend them at a 90-degree angle. It's like you can't go ask people how to do this because nobody else is doing it.
Right. Yep. Very cool stuff. So, like I said, you can follow us on Instagram. Join the Facebook group for Mark of the Maker, or Richard's groups he mentioned earlier is Richard Rogers Knives on Facebook and on Instagram as well. High five to all our Patreon supporters. We really appreciate everybody and all the... we get good feedback through Patreon. We share some extra information. We've been throwing up some show notes stuff in there that's been kind of cool, I think, for people to see. We've gotten some nice comments about that, and we really appreciate their support. They kind of help keeping the show going for us, so that's a great thing. And I think that's it. Thanks again, Richard, for joining us, and we appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Later, folks.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Crine on the web at crineknives.net, in his Facebook group, Crine Knives, or in his Instagram account, at Crine Knives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram at birchtreeblades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram, at msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram, at Mark of the Maker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.